Jonny Catto is the Managing Director of Ipac Packaging Solutions, specialist in sustainable packaging based in Gateshead. Having come from a very different world of corporate finance in London, I was fascinated to go through his journey of starting and owning a manufacturing company in the northeast of England. Having started out as a small business, which consisted of a small family-run team, they are now a business of over 60 staff with exciting growth plans ahead. We discuss in detail the importance of having a USP and the challenges that come with changing the awareness around plastic packaging for the consumer. This was a great insight into how businesses need to pivot and adapt to the ever-changing world we are in. I really enjoyed this episode and understanding what it takes to take a company to that next level. Hope you enjoy it too. So a massive warm welcome to Jonny Catto, someone I've been chasing to come on here for quite some time. So Jonny's the MD of Ipac Packaging Innovations Gateshead. So warm welcome, Jonny. How are we? All good?
All good. Yeah.
Excellent.
All good. Yourself?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Very good. So look, the normal first question to you, which you've listened to everyone gets asked this one. So what does it mean to you to be a leader? What do you say?
I think for me, it's all about leading by example. I think that's the number one for me. I think being seen to be someone who doesn't ask anyone to do something they wouldn't be willing to do themselves. That is number one. I think flowing from that, I think that drives getting buy-in from people through mutual respect. I'm certainly not a kind of stick guy, more of a carrot kind of leader. And yeah, it is all about bringing people on a journey out of mutual respect, not waving a big stick. And I think part of being a leader for me as well is being someone where anyone at any level of the team knows that they can come to you with a problem, no matter how big or small, no matter what type of problem, whether it's a personal thing, a challenge, or even just a cock up for want of a better term, just with the knowledge that they can come to you and it'll just be dealt with in a kind of team mentality. We're in it together, and solved in a kind of proactive way.
Yeah, I completely agree. What's really interesting, right? I'll ask you this if you don't mind, because more and more people now, I would say, have that mindset, and I'm the same, of being, leaders being given respect, wanting respect, that inclusivity, being part of a team, and probably less, like I say, dictatorship and sort of hit people with sticks. That obviously didn't used to be the case. I'm not saying it was every single time, but it's really rare you see that now. And I don't think I've had anyone on here who have said this is the way I manage and it gets results. Do you think that's and I've literally just recorded a podcast as well there before this one, the exact same answer. And I think, are we just changing as a society? I guess, have managers changed because people are changing? Do you know what I mean? Like it's weird because that has been an obvious shift. Why do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be a bit two-sided, doesn't it? I think it's probably a self-fulfilling scenario. I think managers and leaders have to change because there are certain behaviours that just aren't seen as acceptable anymore. But as well, I think we're probably in a transitional period where, and for me, the kind of hardline man, that just doesn't come naturally.
Yes,
but there are probably times where you kind of think, actually, I need to flex a little bit more that way. Which as I say, it's not a natural way for me to be. I like to kind of manage people the way that I would want to be managed. And as I say, I think we're in this kind of transitional period where at one end of the spectrum, you've probably got people who react really badly to that. But actually, you probably have some people who actually, react better to that kind of, fairly hard-lined approach than they do to the kind of softly approach. And I've even had people who've literally said that to me. They're like, look, if I'm doing something wrong, don't call me in for this chat that feels all formal. To me, it feels like, the right way to do it. But actually, they've said, look, just shout at me, tell me I'm, being and I'll pull my socks up. So you get people who actually prefer that kind of, more direct, hard approach. It's a hard balance, isn't it? But I think, over time, I think it's just kind of progressing towards the more kind of inclusive, discussional and persuasive leadership tactics rather than the wave the big stick.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I exactly that. I've had people who said, I like to be told, I like to know where I stand. Sometimes where I hear people explain what their perfect manager was or could be, is I know exactly where I was with that person. I'm thinking, maybe sometimes I am a bit too fussy. Maybe I'm a bit too nice where just be direct. But it is difficult if it doesn't naturally come to you that way of leadership, isn't it? Because you're forcing something. It's
absolutely. And as I say, I think it's really important, and something that needs a lot of kind of attention, and it isn't easy to kind of flex into things that don't come naturally. But I think it's really important to know your audience. Really know what makes individuals tick. To know across the team the response that staff want from you, and the type of leadership that the staff want from you. And as our chairman, my father-in-law, once said to me, a lot of being a leader is acting, right? Acting in a way that doesn't come naturally to you, but you have to for that given scenario. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Excellent stuff. Well, look, so let's go right back. I won't lie to you. I was a bit nervous when I was looking at your career, thinking I might be depth here. He's had a career in finance. It's not the normal sort of premier route, but you've definitely come from a different route of owning a manufacturing and packaging business that potentially the stereotypical person have, which is really interesting to dig around actually. So, I mean, let's take it right back to early days, working in finance. I mean, was that just something you naturally always wanted to do, or how did that come about?
Yeah. So I did economics at uni, and to be honest, kind of left uni not knowing exactly what I was going to do. I kind of had a lean in towards the finance industry, and knew that I probably wanted to go down and work in London for a while post uni. So I actually took a year out after uni and took a bit of time to work out what it was exactly I was going to do, and actually kind of followed a couple of mates into working in audit and corporate finance. So went down and worked at Deloitte for 8 years, starting off in banking and capital markets in audit. Then I moved into corporate finance, and then actually back into audit, but changed industry into oil and gas. So my last couple of years down there were auditing big oil and gas companies.
Yeah, excellent stuff. So, fast forward then, like you say, big corporate world. Imagine a nice, stable job. Could have been there for the rest of your career. Big jump, I guess.
Yeah. As you say, it's not really a conventional route. But essentially, as I say, we've been down in London 8 years, and my wife's from up here as well. And we'd always said when there are kids in the equation, we'd probably move back up north. So we were getting to that point where we were talking about having kids, and I was starting to put the feelers out and look at what opportunities there were up in the northeast for a move. And the natural one would have been either an internal or a kind of related move. So either sticking in professional services, audit or corporate finance, and making a move up, or going into industry but in a pure kind of FD type role. So that was what I was starting to explore. My wife's dad had a couple of successful businesses in the thermoform packaging industry, and he'd sold his last one a couple of years prior, and essentially just floated the wacky idea of setting up a new thermoforming company. So I think he'd mentioned it kind of in passing a couple of times, and we didn't know how serious he was because he was formally retired at the time. But yeah, we kind of got into a conversation. We're getting close to the point where we really were thinking about the move up. He floated it. He floated it a bit more seriously, with some real kind of detail behind it. And I think it was about a 5-10 minute conversation, and we shook hands and said, right, let's do it. So that was kind of New Year time, start of 2016. We incorporated the company in April 16, and just started getting the wheels in motion. Started looking for sites, planning, raising money, starting to look at the market, and all of those things that go in kind of ahead of time. And then about 12 months later, so March 17, got our site and started doing a big refurb on our production site, and got into production May 17.
Exciting. Did you always see yourself as a business owner, entrepreneur, or was this just an opportunity couldn't turn down?
I think, as you said, I've been working in a kind of pretty big corporate environment, and I think I could definitely have been happy in both. There's certainly part of me that wanted to be my own boss and do my own thing. But it was always really a case of, but what? As I say, at the point that we moved, I was working in oil and gas audit. I certainly wasn't going to go off and set up an oil and gas company, because it's not a very easy thing to do. So it's kind of having that spark of what is it that I'm going to do. So actually, Harry floating the idea with his long background in the industry and a lot of industry knowledge was actually just the perfect opportunity to kind of say, right, that's the thing. And I think that's what it always was. It was probably lacking that thing. And that was it.
And what I find interesting is that, and I put myself in the same boat, I think most people start a business, most people don't come from finance route. Most people come from being good at the job and going, I can make a business out of this. Hence why, most owners are, once were apprentices or whatever it would be. But actually, probably the biggest lesson most people learn is to look after your cash. And a lot of them learn the hard way. So I imagine that was a big advantage for you, knowing from the day one that things need to be in place.
Yeah, it definitely was. And just having that skill set where, you can pretty easily put in good processes around forecasting, for example, around cash flow forecasting, business modeling, really understanding your cost base that then drives, your price drivers and all of that piece. That bit came quite easily and quite naturally to me. And then it was just a case of learning the rest, learning the industry. And yeah, I think you're right. I think most people do come through that kind of progression from, call it the shop floor, and then some internal progression, then maybe set off and do their own thing. Mine was just, and then at that point, as you say, they've got to learn skills that they previously didn't have. It was just that on its head for me. And kind of, I started up, as I say, with my father-in-law. He'd been in the industry at that point for probably about 40 years. So there wasn't a lot that he didn't know and couldn't, a lot of wisdom to impart on the technical and industry side of things. We brought in a team around us of very experienced people, some of whom had previously worked for Harry. We're a family business, so within the management team, there's myself, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, Harry, who's now retired, and also my wife on a part-time basis. So we're actually quite lucky that, and we'd all been working down in London, all in kind of different areas. So from a back office functional perspective, we had quite a few of the bases covered. My wife was in HR, I was in finance, my brother-in-law was in sales, my sister-in-law had been in purchasing. So Perfect. Quite a lot of back office functions were covered. We've all kind of, shifted those around a little bit, but it was good for day one kind of startup from an administration perspective. And then, as I say, Harry kind of approached some people that had worked for him previously, and then we just kind of let that kind of spread out a little bit. They approached some people who worked for them previously, and they kind of grew from there. So in terms of the shop floor, the technical expertise, that was brought in, and then us in the background, we just kind of learned it as we went along.
Perfect. You've probably got to be careful what you say here, but how easy was that? Because I think it's, like you say, black and white of it, by sounds of it, you had perfect people in the right positions, but as a family, suddenly your relationships are quite different at work. So was that challenging?
Yeah, add this into the mix. So as I say, we moved up from London. I sold my house and put most of the money, almost all of it, into the business. And starting up, we're a relatively kind of capital intensive-ish industry. So the startup costs are fairly high, running costs are fairly high, and you've kind of got to put all of that in place before actually making a penny. So we ran pretty lean in the early days. So yeah, as I say, we'd kind of sold our house and put the money in. So we actually all went up and lived with my wife's parents.
Oh, really?
So all of us under the same roof as well, working
Work and
together.
living.
Yeah. So definitely, as you say, it definitely changes the dynamics of relationships, and it's a stressful time. So it can put strains in relationships. All been under the same roof, working probably at that point 12, 14, 15 hours a day, and then all going home together, and there's definitely no escape from it. But no, it was good. It was certainly just a massive kind of all in it together feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have you at the stage there where you can almost reflect on that, looking back now, how sort of I imagine it was the funniest part as well in many ways, I guess, all that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as you go through the journey, and I think anyone who's been through a startup journey will get this. It's a roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs. There's twists and turns, and I think kind of there's points where there's points of that kind of feel really challenging and are tough. But I think those are always the points that a few years down the line you look back on actually with the biggest smile on your face. There are some bits that feel like the euphoric moments. And you look back on those and think, oh yeah, that was great, and move on. Whereas the bits that felt the toughest, you look back and really kind of have a bit of a chuckle about, and I think they're probably actually the most important memories.
Yeah, I bet. And was it ever, in terms of who will be the voice of the business, the face of the business, did that organically happen, do you think, or was that something that sort of was a side of business that you need to lead, etc.?
A little bit of both. I think really early days because I was from a totally different industry and different background, and Harry had been in the industry for a long time. I think certainly early days it was more so Harry was the face of it, and I think from the industry perspective as well, I think that was the right thing. Having I call him an industry veteran. Having an industry veteran kind of at the helm, I think is important from a customer
credibility.
From a finance perspective, in terms of kind of raising finance and what have you. But it was at the same time, it was a joint role. If there was obviously any important meeting, whether it was customer side or finance side, would be both of us, and then it just quite quickly just kind of shifted over. And Harry retired so as I say, we set up 2017. Harry retired October 2020. But there was kind of a phase out in the meantime as well. So a bit of a kind of reduction in working days, a bit more kind of working behind the scenes rather than kind of really on the coal face. So it was and I think that's how we kind of envisaged it. Harry set the business up not really to be involved in it a long time. It was really just to kind of set his family up. And so it was always the plan that as soon as we knew what we were talking about, could hold our own in those conversations, then we'd be left to do it.
Excellent. So when was the I guess not every business to some extent has to have a USP or a reason for someone to help finance them, to work with them, etc. The sustainability piece, was that from the off, the differentiator?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting time to set up a plastic packaging company. Actually, right around 2007, 16, 17. I think, and I'm sure we'll go into the kind of anti-plastic sentiment that's out there in a little bit more detail. But that public perception was starting to gain traction, that negative public perception of plastic, and it really kind of got accelerated by an episode of Blue Planet, and that was right around the time that we were starting up. So it was definitely an interesting time. I had mates kind of saying, you must be a bit worried here. Kind of the world's just gone anti-plastic, and you're in the middle of setting up a plastic packaging company. But I think in any of these scenarios, you can see things as threats and you can see them as opportunities, and it was an opportunity. I think the industry had been, in the high volume end, relatively stagnant for quite a long period of time. There's no need to change anything. A lot of packaging footprints had gone into kind of standard formats, and there was no need to change anything. There's no need to change suppliers. There's no need to change design or anything. And at the volume end, that's generally how value is driven. Standardization, huge volume, churn them out in the millions and don't change them. All of a sudden, you had a lot of food companies wanting to know how they could change their packaging in order to drive sustainability benefits. So all of a sudden we had something to talk to people about a little bit more. All of a sudden there was a reason to put down new tooling in order to redesign a pack, get some gauge out of it, get some weight out of it, and reduce the packaging usage by weight. So it did create an opportunity, and also kind of all of a sudden packaging was very high on the agenda of pretty much every food company in the country, whereas previously, what something was packaged in was less important. It was more about getting the product from A to B onto a supermarket shelf, looking good, well protected, delivering shelf life and what have you. Whereas now there's just so much focus on how can we change this and make it more sustainable. And we definitely kind of jumped straight on that. So from day one, all of our, I would say, all of our new product launches, because we're a new company, every product we sold was a new product launch. You always looked at it with the lens of, or through the lens of, how can we make this more sustainable? And as I say, whether that's just redesigning it to get a bit of plastic out, or changing the material, or totally changing the pack format, making it smaller. So again, you're using less material, lower carbon footprint, all of those things. So yeah, it was an interesting time, but definitely an opportunity. And I think that's always the key in kind of running a business, is you can see things as threats, but you don't really get very far if you just see things as threats. You've got to see the opportunity in it as well. And for us, the whole sustainability piece, as well as obviously being the kind of the right thing to focus on in the packaging industry, was an opportunity for us.
It's amazing what, like you say, how popular culture and how like a television program can completely change. I mean, it's the same for the one that came out about veganism, and suddenly overnight everyone was. I mean, I even watched that, and I think I purchased a vegan protein shake, tried it once and hated it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I think you do, it does, doesn't it? It just makes you think.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I think the media positioning of plastic is certainly not doing any of us any favors. And by us, I don't mean our industry, I mean the world. You've got things like the war on plastic, which I think immediately paints this negative picture. It's not the war on plastic waste, which is where the war should be, on plastic waste, or on plastic pollution. It's now become kind of the war on plastic, and unfortunately, I think that's currently driving in our industry quite a lot of actually moves and changes that are counterproductive, totally counterproductive, because they're playing to a consumer perception of plastic, rather than playing to actually what's the most sustainable alternative here. And in many cases, they aren't the same thing. If there's a black and white negative perception of plastic that's painted, and as you say, it was kind of grown in the background, and for the right reasons, but then just that media kind of pickup of it, I think did just kind of really put the gas on it. I think it's, as I say, it's definitely for the right reasons, and it definitely is driving some proactive changes, but also some dangerous ones as well.
Yeah, it's true. And whether, like you say, whether consumers are ticking a box by saying they eat this, they own it, people say virtue signaling, that type of stuff. But you've only got to look at Dragon's Den as an example. First thing they ask, Deborah Meaden, how sustainable is it? And it's almost because that's her thing, and it is, but you're right. I think people then probably feel good about themselves going, I'm not having that. It's plastic, but probably don't understand the journey after or for.
Absolutely. A big part of what we spend, a lot of time discussing is just trying to get that kind of educational piece out around, you can have two plastic items that look exactly the same, and the sustainability credentials on them can just be miles apart, all around kind of how much recycled content is in it, how recyclable is it. Now, to the consumer, they might not look any different, but you've got to kind of we've got to try and get that educational piece out around what is good plastic and what is bad plastic, because it's definitely not all bad. There are some plastics out there that are pretty bad and we should get rid of. But on the flip side, there's some that there aren't any real alternatives to that are a sustainability kind of step forward. In many cases, it's about kind of optimizing rather than totally changing.
Yeah, I imagine that. So I guess for you, is a big part of it marketing, I guess, that awareness piece and on the packaging itself and the story behind it.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, I mean, because we tend to make, we make the plastic tray, it's, we don't control the branding of it.
Okay. Yeah.
So, we do on some of our products put in things like 100% recyclable engraved on the base, or, made with 100% recycled content, things like that. So yeah, there's that bit around getting the message to the consumer that, okay, it's plastic, but have a look at the bottom. It's good plastic. So yeah, there's definitely that side to it. But for a manufacturer in our position where, we're a couple of steps removed from the consumer, and it's either our customers, the food groups, or in most cases the retailer that kind of controls that brand, the brand and the narrative. For us, it's not always as easy as we would like it to be to get that message from us to the consumer.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast for a very quick 30-second pitch of my business. Theo James are a specialist manufacturing and engineering recruitment search firm based in Seaham in the Northeast. If you're looking for any staff or a new opportunity yourself, from a semi-skilled level right the way up to C-suite executive, then please get in touch. We have a specialist consultant in each discipline ready to help. I'm extremely proud of what we've built over the years, and I'd love to extend that service out to you. Thank you. Enjoy the podcast. You talk about, like you say, looking at the opportunity. Do you think it was possible for you as well? Obviously, that the mindset led you to that, but because you were perhaps smaller, so you could be more agile? Because I imagine a big firm suddenly coming up against something like that when they've got 12 sites, probably now impossible to do so, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely a benefit for us. Yeah, as you say, being a kind of a small owner managed business, the flexibility and agility is definitely a big selling point and a big benefit for our customers. And you talked about what's the USP in setting the company up. Part of it was that being the owner managed business, not a huge behemoth of a company where, as you say, decision making slow. I mean, to be fair to our industry, and what the public probably don't realize is that most of our industry is already pretty good in terms of a lot of those sustainability pieces. Recycled content, the main ingredient in thermoform trays is plastic bottles, recycled plastic bottles, and it already was before these kind of discussions really started picking up. It was already there, but absolutely in terms of things like a redesign, or as I say, every product we launched was a new tool for a large company that has loads of tooling investment down. In order to change that, they've got to scrap a lot of tooling and start from scratch. For us, everything, we were able to pick up everything and look at it as a kind of clean slate type scenario. So yeah, being able to kind of make those changes actually without any significant negative impact on ourselves, but also, as you say, in that kind of rapid response way that owner managed businesses tend to be able to react. Yeah, that was definitely a benefit.
Well, going from a family business in terms of the key people and positions to hiring staff and then becoming a different type of firm, how difficult was that culturally to keep or create almost a different culture? Because that's a big shift, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's really difficult. As you grow, we've said from day one, the hardest thing, I think, when companies grow rapidly, and we address this on day one, that ability to scale up and keep the feel of a small company is tricky. It's really hard, right? When we first set up and we were 10 people in total. It was really easy for me to go around everyone in a day and have a good 5-minute conversation and, get that real kind of team. When you're 65 people, I'd be here 24 hours a day and I wouldn't get anything else done.
Yeah.
So, there's little things like that are the cultural bits of being a family business that as you grow, they're really hard. And we put a lot of effort into trying to keep that kind of family business feel as you grow. And that's part of what we are as an employer. You've got the customer side of things. What are the benefits of dealing with an owner managed business? But then you've got the employee side of things. What are the benefits of working for an owner managed business? And as you say, kind of keeping that as you grow is it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's one that we try and focus on as much as possible.
How do you say you've? How would you say child of interest? Because I think you look at challenges now that many challenges right now, and we sat in a round table for the networking event of the week, and businesses talked about the challenges, and one of those obviously was recruitment and retention. And as I said, there's a lot people tend to join new jobs because of salary is still important, but there's still so many other reasons why people join and people stay. And I think people want more than ever. They've wanted something from the job. Do you proactively look at happiness in the workforce, progression? What would you say you've done to really sort of change the game and keep people and attract people, which are two different challenges?
Yeah, they are. In terms of the retention piece, as I say, we try and kind of really keep that kind of team mentality and that family business feel. At the end of the day, the reality is, for the most part, people don't come to work just for the pure love of it. It's to earn a living. But I think, with that in mind, you've got to, I think in this day and age, you've got to make that as kind of enjoyable as you can, the whole employee experience. So, we do a lot in terms of, socials, a couple of times a year, a really good social. Every Friday we shut down for 15 minutes and get a load of great sarnies and coffees in and all sit around and kind of have a catch up on a Friday morning. So loads of little things like that just kind of keep that kind of small business feel and that team mentality. In terms of and then in terms of retention as well, also we kind of have our annual staff survey. We try and keep well in touch with what are people happy about and what are they not happy about. What are we as the business leaders? Where are we doing a good job and where are we potentially failing, and how can we address those? So once a year there's that kind of employee engagement survey around, right, what can we do better? How can we keep people more engaged? How can we keep people more motivated? Obviously, at the minute, the big one is pay. We're in a cost of living crisis. We're still at 10% inflation. So I think that's shifted. You mentioned there, sometimes it's about pay, sometimes it's about other things. I think the balance is starting to shift now just because of inflationary pressures that everyone's facing. So now it's that balancing act is, I think, becoming even more difficult because all of those kind of nice to haves around the background, in the background, I think their respective value versus pay is probably diminishing as inflationary pressures hit people. So it's a tough balancing act, but and it takes a lot of folks. I think anyone else in a kind of business leadership position, I would say. And as you say, we've sat around the table. I've sat around the table with a number of groups, and it's always number one challenge at the minute is that it's staff. The cost element of it, the motivation element of it, the recruitment element of it. Yeah, it's. I think I've not been in the industry for a long time, but the impression is that it's probably tougher than it's been for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. And you can only control what you can physically control, can't you? And I think you'll know from an FE, from a finance point of view, that the salary one is probably one of the trickiest ones because that literally just comes off your bottom line. You don't get any more out of your staff. People will say, I'll give you a rise, I want X, Y, and Z. But the brunt of it is, people are giving people rises to retain and to attract. And I think businesses they'll have less profit, which for some businesses that's okay. For some businesses, that will mean they won't survive. And that's the real balance to be had. That staff need to be in a position where they care enough. But you're exactly right. People come to work for one reason, not the only reason, but the main reason is to get paid. But the fact that you're doing things and you call them little things, but these things are massive. And if you asked 20 companies, I'd be surprised if two do two of the things you've mentioned there, which can have such a big impact. One of which is just spending 10, 15 minutes, like you say, just having a sarnie and having a chat round. What that can mean for some people is massive in comparison to what it physically costs you in time and bacon sandwiches. Just have a chat. It's huge.
And yesterday's one was a big McDonald's run, so I had everyone in on the bank holiday yesterday, and probably will on the other bank holidays. So yeah, and again, this was very much one of me consciously trying to pull back to a few years ago when it was a team of 15 people, and it just kind of the team were in yesterday and I was in, and I just kind of remembered an early day scenario with about 10 of us. We dragged them in on a bank holiday. So me and Harry went and got the Mackie D's run. So I thought, yeah, that those are the little things where as you grow, yeah, they become bigger and they become harder to do on a really regular basis. But they're, as you say, they're actually the really important things of how do we keep that kind of mentality that we're all in it together, and it is that kind of that cozy kind of family business feel.
And you're absolutely right. It's almost when you're a team of 5, 10, whatever that size, those things happen because you're probably caring more about I need to keep staff, because there's something a bit when you're a team of 50 and 60, it's trying to remember that as well. It doesn't matter how big you are.
Absolutely. When it's 5 and 10 people, it's just it almost comes naturally. Right. Yeah. I'm off to McDonald's. What's everyone want?
yeah.
When it's a much bigger team, that that doesn't come.
The Tannoy, it won't be McDonald's, yeah. So it doesn't really work, does it? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, the survey, the happiness survey, by the way, is if there's one thing I think businesses should do is that 100%, because. And in a perfect world, if you can make it anonymous to some extent, even better, because people could be honest. We use one called.
Absolutely, ours is totally anonymous. Yeah,
because some people can be honest about it, and we use one called Office Vibe, which is free. It's free up to like maybe 20 users, but it's brilliant. And I think I get more off that than I do anything else about the business, because first it's so hard, isn't it? When people go, you need to improve on X, Y, and Z. I took my team leaders to Tea of the Week and said, tell me how we can improve the business and tell me how I can improve. And you know what? It's hard, really hard. And not, for both, because it's your business, it's your baby. But if you're going to improve and then they have a voice and they're heard and change them in the back of it. And I just don't think businesses do it. You just don't.
Yeah. And again, it's one where it can actually solve other challenges as well, because we've just said that recruitment is such a challenge at the minute, across the country. I think and beyond the national borders as well. Actually, I think what I've come to realize is you can feel like when you focus a lot on some of those things, and it's totally the wrong thing to lose focus on it, but it is very easy to lose focus on it as you grow and as you're focusing on rapid growth and pressures on people's time become more and more. It is easy. It's too easy to kind of to drop some of those niceties. But actually, I think the value in spending your time and forcing yourself to spend time on those things, actually probably a positive payoff if you look at it in the long run, because if you're just avoiding some of those challenges of actually, losing people and having to go and recruit and fill positions, and the time invested in retraining and all of that, the time that takes actually versus the time of just putting some of that work up front to make sure that you don't lose people in the first place is probably a positive payoff.
100%. The cost of a new hire and the risk of a new hire massively outweighs the time.
I'd say probably a positive payoff. It's definitely a positive.
Yeah. But you'd be surprised how little people do it. No one. There's the age-old argument of should you do exit interviews? And I'm a big believer in them, and I can understand the arguments against it, because people may or may not be honest. But I think if the right person does them, not your manager, and it's phrased in the right way to help the business, then I think in the most people are respectful and will give you honest opinion.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah.
What would you say surprised you the most about manufacturing? Because it is a sector like no other. So, coming from
Yeah.
a corporate world, what do you think has been the biggest, either good or bad surprise about it?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, kind of coming from kind of corporate London. I mean, particularly as well when you're in what I used to do, kind of audit, you're only ever really dealing at a relatively kind of high level group. In terms of the clients that we work with, we would generally be involved at the group level. So you don't see whatever that business is doing. As I say, early days for me, it was banking. Last few years was oil and gas. On the oil and gas side of it, I did a couple of subsidiary audits where you actually go and get to see what's happening on the ground. But for the most part, it was the group HQ in London. So actually getting into manufacturing, yeah, totally different industry, and just being right at the coalface of it. Seeing the day-to-day on the floor struggles and challenges, and so I think probably what the things that have surprised me. I mean, in our industry, actually how fast moving it is, how fluid it is, how much things kind of change like the wind, and you've got to react to them. As I say, our industry is very driven by the weather. You're going to peak up into summer. What you don't know is a heat wave's 2 days, 2 days away, or a week down the line, and just how significantly that can shift everything. And just for us, what is super important is just having that ability to react so quickly to those changes. So I think just that kind of fluid, fast moving element was probably more than I expected. But I think probably what surprised me about the industry as a whole is actually the level of challenges that everyone kind of faces. These challenges that everyone faces, right? I think in my previous career, when you're dealing at a kind of group HQ level, you don't really see what the day-to-day challenges are. And I wasn't in the industry, I was in practice, so you kind of don't see them anyway. I think we're at Ipac, we're very kind of self-critical, and at the management level, a bunch of perfectionists. So we don't like to see anything kind of go remotely wrong. I hold ourselves to maybe too high standards sometimes. But then as you kind of, as you face challenges and you dissect them, and then you start speaking to people, whether it's customers or suppliers or contacts and stuff, and you use some of these examples, and they're just, oh, that's nothing, we have this, and you realize, they've got it 10 times, particularly where they're larger companies, they've got it times 10. So I think that's kind of surprised me, just all of these kind of day-to-day challenges that sometimes we can panic about, just the fact that, everyone gets them on a day-to-day basis. Manufacturing is fast moving, you hit things that you don't expect. And yeah, I think that's kind of been a big kind of learning point for me, is just how to deal with them, how to not over catastrophize things that are just, at the end of the day-to-day challenges. I think probably those two things are the big surprises for me.
And I imagine the fact that you have to be agile, dependent on things like the weather, things that you literally can't plan for. Mm-hmm. Presumably that would have helped you from times like Brexit, COVID, whatever happens tomorrow. Does that give you a bit more confidence that you've gone through those sort of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the last few years have been, they've certainly given everyone a hell of a lot to react to, which is just huge learning, right? For everyone who's been through it, for which is, a lot of the world with COVID. I think you always learn more from challenging times than you do when it's plain sailing, without a doubt. So yeah, I think everyone's had to learn new skills in terms of reactiveness, in terms of kind of robustness, and yeah, I mean, we certainly have. But it definitely has been a help to be kind of small and nimble and agile, particularly around COVID, where we went into lockdown the day a machine was landing in our yard, and all of a sudden, engineers weren't coming because we're in lockdown. Contracts that were meant to be starting over the next couple of months just got kicked, what ended up being up to 12 months down the line. So yeah, just that kind of quick response, and right, what do we do now? And putting wheels in motion for new projects. I mean, we ended up doing medical visors, the machine that that landed. The day we went into lockdown, ended up running medical visors for probably 6 months, when it was meant to be running food packaging. So just being able to kind of react to those things quickly has definitely been a help.
Have you are you someone who faces challenges head on and deals with it okay, or have you had to work on your own mindset and your own sort of?
No, I definitely have to work on my own mindset. I think with my background and personality type, I think I'm a very analytical type person. So if I'll step back and probably overanalyze a problem. Get myself back into the spreadsheets and try and where sometimes it just needs don't worry about that, just do it. So that's definitely been a big change for me. Trying to not overanalyze things.
And imagine as the business has grown, you've now got people in business that make those decisions for you, and those
absolutely. And I think it has just also been a bit more of that learning curve for me, where it's starting to come a bit more natural, that just do it kind of thing. But absolutely, the team around, so our finance team and the operational team, do give a lot of support on that.
What drives you now, would you say? What drives you personally in terms of motivation? Because I imagine right at the start, it's just, like you say, family business. Let's just where you're at now.
I think at the start it was just the pure challenge of it, the pure kind of excitement of the unknown, and I mean literally just not knowing what a day would bring. 1 minute kind of knocking down walls and putting them back together, and the next sitting putting a business model together in Excel, all of that stuff. That was, the first couple of years, it was just the challenge of the startup. What motivates me now? I mean, going back to those days, I mean, we got the keys to our factory a couple of days, I think it was, before we had our first child. So our son was born, literally a few days after we got keys to the factory. So I mean, really what motivates me is my family, my kids, whenever you have tough times, you just kind of remind yourself what you're doing it for, and for me, it's your family. So that's what motivates me. Obviously, still, pride in the business and what we've built really does motivate me, and wanting to kind of see that continue and continue to grow. I mean, we've it's really nice to kind of look back on what is only really not even 6 years yet. And having kind of got to, at the minute, we're doing about 400 million units a year, maybe a bit north of that now, with, as I say, kind of 65 staff. Kind of just looking at that and the pride in what we've built really motivates me. In terms of our growth plans, we're in the middle of setting up our second site, which will be very similar to what we have here in Gateshead, and we'll be doing kind of almost duplicating up there. So that's kind of exciting at the minute, and a big part of our growth plans. So that kind of definitely keeps us well motivated and excited. But the underline for all of it really is the family.
Brilliant stuff. And Harry, has he managed to keep himself away from the business?
He has. Well, I think my wife and I having 3 kids, and my sister-in-law and her husband having had one, and another one on the way pretty soon. That gives them something to do outside work time. But and in the midst of all of it as well, looking back on the few years. So my wife and I had, in amongst the startup and Brexit and COVID, we had 3 kids. We fully renovated a house. So again, that was something that we said, right, Harry, you're project managing that.
That's it.
So no, we've kept him well busy outside the office, but no, he, as I say, he set this one up kind of for the family more than anything. So I think he was happy to take a step back when he retired, and he has. He's fully retired.
Yeah, great stuff, mate. Look, this has been great. It's sometimes quick fire questions, but I think the sort of stuff I'd ask anyway, I think you've already covered. It's been a very good journey. As I always say at the end, I was thinking about my own takeaways. And I think takeaways for me, but also any businesses, how important, however big you are, 5, 60, 5,000, that you cash is king, obviously, but your staff is your staff, and don't forget what made you good in the first place. Don't forget why those probably 5 are still with you. plus another however many. I think it's really important that in this day and age, with the challenges we have, to make sure, and that anyone can do that. Doesn't matter if you're owner business listening or you're a team of two. You can do your bit, and I think it's been great, and it's just good to see, like you say, the awareness piece, the sustainability piece, the way that the society is changing. Obviously, you're well on board with that. So thanks, Joe. It's been great, man. I really appreciate this.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.